What's up guys, and welcome back to Cosplay with Clement. And today, I'm going to show you how I made my Mandalorian costume. Today, to celebrate the third season of The Mandalorian being released at the moment, I'm going to tell you how I went about making my Din Djarin costume. Before you jump straight into making a Mando costume, just so you know, this one took me about a year and a half to make. I started in December 2020 and finished around May 22. There's still a lot of things that I need to work on, honestly, and the costume is far from over. Also, it's a fairly expensive costume to do. It's probably over £1,000. Alright, now that I've scared you away, let me tell you exactly how I made the costume. But first, we're gonna quickly go over where to find all the items that you're gonna need for that.
All the 3D printed parts of the costumes are coming from Propercraft on Etsy. Daniel, the guy that owns the shop, is doing a fantastic job with the prints and shipping them super quickly. For me, it was the best bang for my buck in Europe, as he offers a complete package of the full armor and weapons for what I believe is a decent price, even though it's not entirely screen accurate. If you're in North America, my pick would be to buy from Galactic Armory, as I found the files he makes are really good and the prices for his prints are also a pretty good deal. That's where I get most of my 3D files now. If you decide to go with Galactic Armory, you can get a discount on the website using the code Cosplay with Clement. And to be completely honest, I also get a small cut, so that's a way to help out the channel. Thanks. The flight suit comes from Manually Closer on Etsy as well. They're doing a fantastic job, and the only downside is a fairly long waiting time. The flight suit is custom made to my measurements, and it's still a fairly reasonable price. Finally, all the leather parts are from Fanfiction Props on Etsy, and they look amazing. I'm not gonna lie, they're on the expensive side, but in my opinion, they're fantastic. They're ready to wear, they're the perfect size, but still adjustable, and they're super accurate. The rifle strap is awesome, and I just had to connect it to the rifle to be able to just sling it over my shoulder and look badass. Also, all the pouches are actually functional, and they're perfect for business cards or Mando coins to give away at cons.
Alright, now that we know where everything is from, let's jump back into it, starting with the weapons. So, they are both 3D printed, and they came in a lot of different pieces. And the rifle, still separate to make it easier to transport.
After assembling them, I used filler primer and a lot of sanding to try and get them looking smooth. After that, I primed them and painted them black before dry brushing them with silver paint to get all the edges to pop out nicely. I painted a few details gold and I was pretty much done. I then painted the stock/handle brown and dry brushed it with like different shades of rose sienna and burnt umber, and voila, wood grain. I used my airbrush to create a gradient on the fork of the handgun rifle to simulate a burn effect. I'm not very happy about it, so I might redo it at some point, but for now it's fine. For the strap, I just epoxied a piece of metal rod in the stock of the gun to hold it safely, and I used the strap that came with the bandolier. For the vibroblade, I just smoothed it, similarly to the gun, and then painted it with silver rub and buff and a bit of blue for the handle with some paint chipping effect. I might have a tutorial for that in the future, as I'm remaking some parts of the costume to be more screen accurate, and the vibroblade is one of them.
Next, let's talk about the armor. And let me tell you, Beskar is a piece of work. If you're new to 3D printing and you want a project to get started, I would highly recommend not starting with the Mandalorian. This thing is such a pain to smooth and paint to make it look good. As you can see, most of my armor is not as shiny as my helmet. And there's a good reason for that. Chrome is a pain in the neck to paint. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before talking paint, let's talk about smoothing and sanding all of that so we can get to the painting stage.
Once I have the piece out of the printer, the first thing I do is to cover it in Bondo, glazing and spot putty. This is quite difficult to find here in the UK, and apparently some people use wood filler and have great results, so I would suggest trying stuff and see what works the best for you. Then, first pass of sanding. I usually use something about 100 grit, as the goal is not yet for it to be super smooth, but mostly to be smooth enough. Then I hit the piece with a layer of filler primer. I usually would do another pass of sanding, probably something like 240 or 320 grit, and if I still see layer lines, I will put on some more filler primer and rinse and repeat. When I'm happy with the results, I'll start spraying grey primer on the piece. It's easier to see imperfection with the grey, and I'll spot where I need to sand more. At this point, I will start sanding with 400 grit or more until I'm happy with the surface of the print. For most of the armor, I stopped after 600 grit, but I went all the way to 1000 for the helmet to make sure it was looking as good as possible. I usually wet sand after 400 grit, as I believe it might help make the pieces smoother, but that might just be my weird brain telling me that. Once I'm done with the sanding, I'll do another thin coat of primer to make sure everything is ready for paint. Be careful with that layer of paint. If it's too heavy and runs, back to sanding. Happened to me more than once, so don't worry if you make that mistake. For shiny Beskar, you need a shiny base coat. I'm using the chrome from Alclad as my Beskar, so I've decided that it made sense to have gloss black, also from Alclad, as the base coat as well. I pretty much do the whole painting with my airbrush for the armor. Once the whole piece is covered with a thin layer of black, I do a wet coat with the same black to make sure it's really shiny. Then, just to make sure, 24 hours of drying. The next day, the pieces are ready for the chrome. I do very thin layers, trying to get an even coverage on the whole piece and doing more layers if I want the chrome to be lighter. This part is really tricky, as painting big pieces with an airbrush and getting even coverage can be difficult, so you'll need some practice. Then comes the hard part, the one that's going to dictate the finish you're going to get. You can clear coat the piece, or not.
For the helmet, I went without a clear coat, and as you can see, it's much shinier than the rest of the armor. And I decided to do that for the helmet, because for me it's like the centerpiece of this costume. And having something that looks chrome for real, like you can see the camera in it, it was quite important. I haven't tried the 2K clear coat or anything similar yet, but if I do, I will do an update video to tell you how it goes. Also, I work in the film industry, and I went to the costume department to chat with the guys on how they would paint chrome and clear coat it. And they both told me the same thing. Don't clear coat it, and then you'll have the best chrome possible. Also, you can look up on YouTube how to paint chrome with graphite powder. It seems to yield pretty good results, and you don't need an airbrush for that, so it's more accessible maybe. The choice is yours. Some pieces of the armor are a bit different, especially in their color scheme, so I'm gonna quickly go over them.
While doing some reference research, I found this picture, which was very helpful finding the right shades. So for the hand plates, I used chalk white cream and Himalayan blue. For the hip plates, that's one thing that's not accurate with Propercraft package, I used the deep sea shade from Montana as well. The knee piece is Mont Fuji blue and silver on the 2 dots. Last but not least, the shin piece is painted with Shock Brown Dark and the chevron is painted with Chestnut. I went over the whole armor with some black and brown washes to make it look worn and used. By the way, since the right thigh plate looks darker in the show, I decided to go a bit heavier with the black and not wipe everything away. And for the right gauntlet, I also painted a Mendo pewter on the gauntlet instead of putting in electronics. I might revisit that in the future, but for now, that's good enough. I did highlight some edges on the thigh plate and on the signet with some Robin buff, and that was pretty much it.
Alright, the armor's done, and that's probably what took the longest. Especially since I didn't have to make the rest, so kinda makes sense. For the flight suits, as I said, it fitted great out of the box, so I just needed to weather it a little bit and find a way to attach the armor to it. For that, I used some good old Velcro with E6000s to reinforce the seams. And, as you can see, that's it.
I used suspenders with the trousers to help them stay in place with the weight of the armor, and I believe that's all the modifications I did. For the cape, I cut a few holes in it and dragged it across the parking lot of my makerspace, and boom, weathered. For the gloves, I used 2 pairs, a black motorcycle one of which I cut the finger off, and a pair of yellow working gloves. Weathered them quite heavily, and that's it. I still wear both pairs on top of each other, and honestly, it's not so bad. Use the same Velcro plus A6000 for the hand plates, and that's it.
I'm quickly gonna go over the helmet in its own section, because I probably worked on this as much as I worked on the rest of the armor. This is not to explain like a different process, but this is more so to tell you which mistakes I did painting chrome, and how you can avoid them. This thing is the bane of my existence.
I had so many problems with the paint during the whole process, and almost every time it was on the helmet. I have painted it 4 times, I think, as I'm speaking, and I think I'll have to redo another time. At first, I made the mistake of using a spray can to do the layer of gloss black before the chrome, and it unfortunately came with a texture that did not allow the chrome to be shiny, so back to sanding. On the second attempt, I did not wait long enough before the aqua glow clear coat, and the paint cracked. So back to sanding. For the third attempt, I was very careful with waiting times and very light with the clear coat. The helmet looked great, and it was time for weathering. And that's when it became apparent that the clear coat was too light, and the chrome rubbed off at the same time as the black and brown washes. So, back to sanding. This time, I took all the care that I could. It was sanded perfectly, the black gloss went on great, and the chrome was perfect. And this is kind of where we are now.
But the problem is, it's not protected, and it took a bit of damage. I don't know if you can see it clearly. But yeah, the helmet was a bit damaged. And that's alright, because that was the risk, and I accepted it.
And I'll eventually have to sand it again and paint it again. But that's in the future. For now, it's good enough. I'll just touch up the paint before the next con to make it look decent, and we'll be good to go.
Also for the helmet, I had decided to put a bit of resin inside, as the helmet, the cheeks, seemed a bit flimsy and I was scared to break them. Also I've added a few pads inside for comfort, and the visor is just held up with some good old duct tape.
The visor came in the package from Propercraft, but you can buy a replacement welding visor to cut the shape, or buy one from Galactic Armory if you're in the States.
And there you are. Most of the costume is done. But wait, you don't have any pockets. And we need to fix that. And that's where this little rascal comes into play.
I've decided to take inspiration from The Mandalorian Season 2, where Mando carries Grogu in a bag. To make the bag, I used a pillowcase that I folded inside itself to reduce its size, and I used pieces of an old tote bag to make the strap that goes around my shoulder. As for Grogu, this one is the metal plush that I shaded with my airbrush a bit, and I also weathered his clothes heavily with a mix in black and brown. He's the perfect companion for cons, and he helps a lot during photos. Alright, almost done. I'll just go over some of the accessories quickly. The cartridges on the leg are the ones I got from Propercraft, as they were too big for the bandolier. For that, I used a wooden dowel that I cut and sanded to look a bit like cartridges. It's not perfect, but it does the trick well enough until I upgrade it later down the line. I also received thermal detonators in the package, but I haven't yet finished them with magnets and then attached them to the belt, but that's in the works. Last in the list is the Darksaber. I 3D printed this one myself from Thingiverse. Credit to case study number 8. And then I just assembled and painted it black and gunmetal. I know this particular version is from Rebels, but for now it's good enough. I'll print another one later.
I'm gonna quickly show you how everything goes together when you're putting on the costume, and I'm gonna leave you with a couple of things that I'd like to work on for the costume.
To be honest, the costume is not finished. This is just a V1.
As you can see, V2 is already underway. I have reprinted the hip plates that were not so great. They're a bit better now, but they're still not screen accurate because I printed them from the old Galactic Armory files, and he has since updated them to be more screen accurate, so I'll need to reprint them and repaint them again. Also, I have a jetpack and a lot of accessories in the background, including the butt plate, a fob, and a new vibroblade. So yeah, I'm working on that V2 of the costume, but it's still a long way to go. I'm tired of painting Beskar at the moment, so all of this is gonna wait, and I'm gonna focus on other costumes and other props that maybe you'll find some hints in some of the videos.
Also, I want to fix all the little imperfections and inaccuracy, starting with the cartridges and detonators. I have already started to look into it, and I have pretty good ideas to improve the costume, but that's gonna be the topic for another video.
I hope this video was helpful for you, and if you have any questions or idea, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments. Also, please consider subscribing if you don't want to miss any of the videos coming out in the future. Anyway, I hope you had a great time with me today, and I wish you a good day. Until next time, guys. This is the way. Alright, some parts of the armor are a bit different with the painting scheme, for example. And just so you know, this is how it looks like under the costume. It's not a summer costume. Don't do that. Don't be like me. Think.